This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Looking back on the big stories of 2018 and what may be ahead for 2019. The old and the new on this edition of inStudio. Wow, what a year 2018 has been. A good bit of the news dominated by politics. Pensacola has a new mayor, Florida has a new governor, and Nancy's back. The Democrats have taken back control of the U.S. House of Representatives. No doubt Trump and Pelosi will likely take D.C. rancor to a whole new level in 2019. Meanwhile, Pensacola dodged a bullet, but our friends farther to the east were not so lucky as Hurricane Michael spread massive devastation. On this edition of inStudio, we've assembled a panel of journalists whose job it is to cover and report the stories that matter. We'll look back on 2018 and take a swing at prognosticating for 2019. Lisa Nellison Savage is the executive editor of the Pensacola News Journal, a position she's held since 2014. Her journalism career spans over 2 decades. Rick Outson is the owner and publisher of the In Weekly newspaper and Rick's blog. He's also a published novelist. His book is entitled City of Grudges. Dave Dunwoody is a producer and journalist at 88.1 WWF Radio, our local NPR affiliate. Dunwoody has covered Northwest Florida for over a decade and a half. Andrew McKay is host of Pensacola's Morning News on News Radio 1620 and 92.3 FM, a position he has held for 5 years. Welcome back. Thank you all. We did this last year. It was such fun. I said, let's do it again.
The band's together again.
The band is back together again. Let me begin with you, Rick. What was in your judgment, the biggest local story of 2018?
Well, I think the one that's going to have the farthest reach is going to be ST Engineering opening up at the airport. I think that it showed us a lot of things. One is that it's creating 400 to 500 jobs. They're already looking at expanding it to 4 more hangars. It'll be the second largest MRO in the country if that is able to happen. It also showed us what economic development is, and that because this project began in 2011, so it takes how long it takes to develop economic development projects is significant too. But I think that this is a difference maker for us as a community because it'll create nice paying jobs, light manufacturing jobs. So I think for us it's definitely the legacy of the Mayor Hayward administration, as well as it proves every day what Florida West is doing for the community. So it's got a lot going for it.
Yeah. Lisa, in your judgment, the biggest local story?
I mean, I think the election, our local election, the amount of money people were willing to put into it, the lengths they were willing to go, the campaigns that they were going to run, definitely.
Number of candidates that we had was a new record too.
Absolutely, came from all walks of life,
Right,
people
yeah.
we didn't expect to run, and the things that they're going to do, I mean, they really are shaking up the dynamic of every board that we have, and
Right.
I think what the mayor is going to do is really, it's going to be a fun story to watch next year.
Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree with Lisa. I mean, the election, obviously, the Project Titan pending, assuming that everything comes through with it, is a big deal. I actually thought the beach issue was an interesting one. Last year, I remember we talked a lot about how citizens got engaged and pushed back in ways against their local government. And though I disagree a lot with what the beach people stood for, they were very effective at what they did. And just using the process and the tools available to them, they pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and got what they wanted eventually. So you're seeing even more citizen activism, citizen reporting, non-official sources that are still very useful sources of information. I know to me personally and what I do. So you're just seeing kind of an expansion of access to information, which certainly showed up in the election, like you said, with lots of participation.
Dave?
I'll have to agree with Andrew and Lisa. It was the election. We not only elected a new mayor, but we also elected new members of the city council and county commission, but it went beyond that. It was the largest, I believe, the largest turnout for a midterm election, probably in recent history, if not all of history. People are starting now to realize, hey, I have a voice. I can go and use that voice and select who I want to represent me. And that I think was the main thing right there. So that's going to make it very interesting in 2020 when the presidential election comes around again, and all of the other seats. Also, we have a new governor. It's going to be interesting to see how much of Rick Scott's philosophy he's going to adopt, and how much is going to be Ron DeSantis.
And how much is going to be Donald Trump in
And
the
Donald
case,
Trump,
in
too,
the
yeah.
case of DeSantis?
The other thing that I think plays in all of this, and even though y'all disagree with me, it's okay, and that happens often.
Never do.
But just also think the role I think Civicon played in all this, because Civicon activated people in a different way.
Yeah.
They had a regular forum once or twice a month where they got to listen to perspectives outside this area and got to meet and talk about issues differently. And you're seeing that cascade through the community. When we debate what we're going to do with the old school district administration building, when we debate what do we want to happen at Bruce Beach, these are Cervantes. People are looking at issues so differently, and I think that's going to cascade with people wanting to run. And we had more people running this year than we've ever had before in local races. Over 50 people running. $1.4 million was raised by local candidates. Another $300,000 to $400,000 was spent on PACs to get people elected, which didn't work very well.
I was gonna say, even there, the money didn't always
right,
win.
yeah, almost $2 million were spent on just local races. That's not counting Congress or the state races. You get an engaged public, you get money coming into the area. 2020 could be very, very interesting.
And I'm sorry, go
So,
ahead,
well, we
Lisa.
talked about that last year, that we said it was the year of the
Right.
people, and that was at the end of the year, and that certainly has played out way more than we even anticipated. When we started Civicon, we just wanted to bring in people to help educate us and to educate the community, and it just snowballed. We were talking earlier about how it's changed even us as journalists. We're asking better questions, we're asking the right questions, we're holding, not just we as journalists, actually more important, the community is holding elected officials accountable. They're asking the right questions, and you're no longer able to just breeze through an answer, because they've done their homework. They know what to look for, and those are the types of answers that they're expecting from their community.
The level of conversation online and offline is tremendous, and people are expecting that you know what you're talking about. Like you said, Civicon, but it's also digital access to information, resources, the sharing of those, and the number of citizens who are engaged at a really high level that know what's going on as much as many of us do, or more sometimes than we do. And I mean, I have a felt need that I need to really keep up to make sure that I don't sound dumb in front of the people who might know better than I do when I'm talking on the radio.
Yeah, and don't you think Pensacola is finally starting to find itself? And I would almost say that across Northwest Florida. But don't you think we're finally starting to find our identity?
I think so, and one of the things that we learned through Civicon, to bring that back up, is that's on the community to say, what do you want your identity to be? We can define that for ourselves, and I think this is a community that people want to move to, whether you're a resident or you're a business owner, you're a developer. People want to be here, and we're finding that we can ask the right questions of those developers, and we can say no, and we can say, this is what we want for our community. We don't just have to take any development now because it's bringing jobs. Because we know people want to be here.
And if you look back to all of the blue ribbon committees and all the blue ribbon studies that got made at great expense and then put on the shelf to collect dust, I think Civicon has brought an end to that. I think this round of whatever emerges from this is going to be stuff that's going to be implemented. There'll be a reason, they'll be given a reason to implement it, and the money will be there, and it will move forward, unlike the previous studies.
There's in the past, I think, there's a lot of times things that were great ideas didn't come to pass they just kind of died of their own exhaustion or something. Now, a lot of things that seem like they're going to happen get said no to. I mean, like the Incoa deal. I mean, it might still come back, who knows, but there was a real pushback against that. Obviously the fish hatchery, which you guys were a big part of bringing awareness to that, there was a big push on that, and it wasn't just the deal kind of died a slow death, it was stopped by people who were opposed to it. Again, that citizen pushback on what they want, again, informed by their picture of what we're supposed to become.
You were talking about politics, and you were talking about Mayor Hayward as he left office. I remember asking all of you last year, did you think Mayor Hayward would run again? And I believe pretty much everyone said, yeah, they thought he would.
Why would you bring that up? Why would you bring that up?
So were you surprised when he said, I'm done?
Has he stopped being mayor? I just got a mailer last week. I'm not sure it's over yet.
I think by the time he had announced that he wasn't running, it didn't catch any of us by surprise. That there had been enough change in the community, upcoming, the boards were changing. He knew that, and he had other things. He had accomplished some of the things he wanted to accomplish, and it was a different environment now, and not one that he wanted to be involved with.
I think it was something of a surprise because he seemed to enjoy the job so much. He enjoyed being the face of Pensacola and going around representing the city, various causes in other parts of the country. So I think that was the surprise right there. Why would he walk away from something he enjoyed so much? But I interviewed him afterward. He made the announcement, and he said simply, "My time has come."
The closer we got to the deadline where he couldn't actually file anymore, the more I got to wondering would he change his mind, because whenever we talked to him, he always seemed more optimistic, more upbeat, more enthusiastic, almost like he was trying to run again, but didn't make that decision ultimately.
Andrew, and I think with Ashton, he came in. It was the perfect time for Ashton. We were close to completing the Community Maritime Park. Main Street sewage plant had left downtown. We needed a bright face. We needed an optimistic leader, and he gave us that. At the same time, we had someone like Quentin and Rishi Studer who were willing to step up and put millions of dollars into downtown that made something happen. We had a governor with Rick Scott that was jobs oriented, that wanted an ST engineering to happen. So he was willing to put more money up than we ever would have seen. So it was perfect timing on a lot of different levels. And what happens the next period, we don't know. I mean, if you listen to the economists, you listen to your guys, they're talking about a recession's on the edge here, credit's getting tighter. It's going to be a different kind of world. We go through cycles, but the last 8 years was a perfect timing for this kind of growth. And I think you're right. It did put us on the map in a lot of different ways. And the people know about Pensacola. When you travel around town, around the country, people know Pensacola now.
And there was a question whether or not the strong mayor form of government would be successful. I guess they figured in Navy terms this was a shakedown cruise. Ashton Hayward's administration, and that proved beyond a doubt that the strong mayor form of government is successful, and I don't anticipate anybody want to go back to the old form.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. I definitely wouldn't think so.
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I think the downside of the Hayward administration was the operational side, and there was a lot of thuggery and bullying of people. And so the challenges with Grover is, I think we've got to show the operation side could work. Definitely the marketing side worked and in the right time for things, but we still have got to show that government can work without being so political as it was the last 8 years.
Hold that thought. I want to come back and kind of get you guys' thoughts on what do you think Mayor Robinson will do and kind of your impression so far. We are discussing the big stories of 2018. There's a whole lot more to come. Hope you'll stay with us. We're coming back after this brief break. You're watching inStudio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. Welcome back. This is In Studio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're looking back on the big stories of 2018 and looking ahead at what 2019 may bring. Our guest, Rick Outson from the In Weekly newspaper and Rick's blog, Lisa Nelson-Savage from the Pensacola News-Journal, Andrew McKay from News Radio 1620 and 92.3 FM, and Dave Dunwoody from 88.1 WWF Radio. We're talking about the outgoing administration with Mayor Hayward. Now in comes Mayor Grover Robinson. Your impression thus far?
Well, I think he started out fantastic with the idea of this transition team and taking the time. There were no knee-jerk reactions. I mean, he is going to take upwards of 3 months to go out on a fact-finding mission, bring in experts to talk to him on various issues from walkability to communication to transparency. And he's going out into the community and talking to different people, and I think that's pretty unusual for an incoming mayor to do. He also started out by doing a short, simple survey of his employees just to get some very basic information, and it sounds like he's going to dive in much deeper. So, he's going to find out who's he surrounded by down through the ranks completely and bring that right expertise to the surface, which I think is fantastic.
Oh, I think so. All right. Mayor Robertson, by the time this airs, will have already broken Ashton Hayward's record for press conferences with 4. But we've gone to the press conference. Andrew and I are there every time. It's relaxed. You can ask any question you want to ask. He tries to give you his best information he can. This is Aaron, but he's already committed to the town hall meetings. His plan is to meet in every district in 2019 twice. And that was at the clip that Ashton was originally. And then 2013, the wheels fell off the bus and he didn't go back out again. But I think because of Civicon, because of what we're seeing happening, people want to address their leaders. And Grover's very, very good in town halls. He can take an angry mob and listen to them, and they respect him. Everyone likes to be liked, but he really can handle a meeting well. So I'm very, very comfortable with the way we're going as far as the transparency and openness.
Yeah. I mean, I was of the opinion that either Brian or Grover would make a good mayor. I thought it was a choice between 2 good alternatives. And even the other men who ran, most of them were very good alternatives as well. I've been stunned by how efficient, by how open, by how forthcoming. I mean, you and I, we're in the press conference every Monday, and here's what we're working on. What are your questions? Here's my best answer. I don't know, I'll get back to you. Well, that's probably a problem we need to look into. He came right in and addressed the difficulties in the legal department that they were having. It's wild. I mean,
you ask for a record, you get the record.
Exactly,
I mean, it's just not very complicated. It's,
Yeah, it's very, and even you notice it in city council. I mean, he's there at the meeting. They've only had the one so far, but there again, there was a question about the skate park and the Hollis T. Williams Park and the funding for all this, and the council is in doing their discussion, and Grover ducks out the back and calls Commissioner Luman May, who's the chairman of the county commission, to make sure he's fully on board with the restore money to come in for the other half of the funding for the project. You're there in the meeting in order to get things done when they need to get done, and he did exactly that in one early example.
You're seeing Mayor Robinson, a continuation of County Commissioner Robinson. Everything Andrew mentioned, he stays on top of things. He's got his ears to the ground, so to speak. He wants to engage with his constituents, and now he has much more to see what their needs are. And also, since he's been pretty much the tip of the spear on the oil spill. He was county commissioner when it happened in 2010.
He was a chairman.
He was a chairman. Yeah, he's leaving that post next month.
Right.
But I would imagine his clout, his influence will still be there. So that's a very good break for Pensacola in the quest for getting Restore Act money.
I liked how he handled the ARB thing, and that was the point where the Architectural Review Board met on the Garden Street property. There was some question whether or not everyone got to speak in the meeting or not, and Grover could have. He asked the chairman to meet again. The chairman, which was within his right, didn't do it.
Right.
But Grover didn't. He didn't waver on it. He went back to the council, said, "I'm asking you to make this policy that every meeting the chairman has to ask, are there anyone who wants to speak? It's a minor change, but it's a huge change. And it just, I thought it set the right tone.
It was very diplomatic, the
Right,
way he handled
right.
that. And even when he went to Triumph, he
Right.
goes to Triumph and he gets all yeses and support on one thing that he's asking for, at least for a delay, and then he basically gets scolded almost on the other project.
Right,
But in both cases, he handled it very diplomatically, very relatably, and I thought effectively, given the circumstances, having been handed the surprises about the funding for Triumph.
I think that's-
For Project Titan, sorry.
I think that's one of the big differences between him, Mayor Robinson, and Mayor Hayward is you can critique a policy or a decision or something he said, and Mayor Robinson he'll listen and he will come back, he will explain himself. He's not going to be angry about that. And I think Mayor Hayward had a difficult time accepting that not everybody was always going to be on board, and you couldn't sway an opinion once it had been made.
Interesting. Let me also ask you, talking about some of our neighboring communities who also have new mayors, Gulf Breeze and also Milton. Heather Lindsay over in Milton becoming, I believe, the first female mayor ever in the city of Milton. So kind of some fresh energy there. I know you guys did a nice piece on her in the Pensacola News Journal. Your thoughts?
Again, I think she's going to be really great. Many of the same points that we talked about with Mayor Robinson, she has the same. She had been very active. Obviously, she was the lawyer for the city. So she's familiar with the politics, but she ran a very good campaign, and Mayor Weiss respected that, and there was a really good transition, a good handoff. They were working together before she ever took office, and I think that's a good sign for the community.
Yeah. And Gulf Breeze, any thoughts?
Gulf Breeze Landfair is a councilman running. I think, as the new mayor, I think that it's been 14 years since I was on the council, so I haven't been back to City Hall. They haven't asked me back.
It was the pay, right?
They haven't asked me back. I made that $1 a year, but slightly more than what I make as publisher. But I think Gulf Breeze is it's Mayberry. It's a small town. I think that in the end, Landfair was who they knew the most, and I think that consistency has been for the most part. There have been hiccups. There were some definitely hiccups over the last 2 years, but I think that you'll see Gulf Breeze. They had to get used to not having Buzz Eddy as city manager. They're having to adjust, but change is part of the way things should be.
Let's talk about state politics a little bit. Were you guys surprised the gubernatorial race was so close?
Yeah.
I
was surprised at the primaries.
Yeah, I was surprised that DeSantis managed to get nominated because everybody had their chips, on Putnam. And then all of a sudden, DeSantis makes a couple of trips to Washington to pose to Trump, and the next thing you know, he's the gubernatorial nominee.
Yeah.
Well, whoever Collier Merrill backs early is never going to get the nomination. So I just want to go on record to say that. What I was surprised is how close the Democrats came this time in so many races. The Democrats picked up seats in both the Florida House and the Florida Senate. Nelson almost held on. Gillum came very, very close. And Gillum was a flawed candidate. Yep. I mean, you're looking at he was under that cloud of federal investigation. Yeah. Of course, he hadn't been indicted, probably won't be indicted. Under that, he was much more progressive than the Democrats had run in a long time, more challenging. And I think that if DeSantis doesn't get the next 4 years right, the Democrats could make huge gains.
Do you think it was close in part because of the remark by DeSantis, "Don't monkey this up"?
I think there was a lot of that going on, but I think Gillum was very, very charismatic.
He's very easy to listen to. He's persuasive. He's likable. And DeSantis, you might like him, but he's not the same kind of presentation as a speaker. Certainly, he doesn't build that rapport. He's not going to have the big crowds that are cheering their brains out for him the way obviously Trump does, or even the way Gillum would. So,
well, Gillum came to Pensacola, spoke Panhandle Tiger Bay Club, and like you say, I mean, in DeSantis, I knew folks that supported him philosophically, but didn't necessarily think he was a great campaigner. So, had Gwen Graham been the Democratic nominee, you think she'd have won? against
I think
DeSantis?
so.
No.
I think she would have been.
I don't. I mean, we endorsed Gwen, but Andrew did, I think, as good as any Democrat could have done. I think Putnam would have the best of all the choices out there. Putnam
He would have won
been the
that
best.
by an easy margin, I think.
But you know, I think the other thing we need to talk about is just Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is the one who is so involved both in Trump and the DeSantis campaign.
Right.
Matt Gaetz is helping lay out what what the state government's going to look like for the next. He's quickly become the most influential politician in Northwest Florida, if not one of the most in the state. As angry as as crazy it is to deal with him and some of the stances that he takes, you can't deny that he's played all these cards. He's got Trump on speed dial, and DeSantis leans on him heavily.
Laying out the transition
Right.
for DeSantis.
Right.
Yeah.
He was his debate coach,
he was the
which
guy-
he didn't do that
right.
well at. But
He was the guy down fighting the fight in Broward County when
Right,
the recount was going on. Yeah, he's been very effective.
What do you think? What do you think his long-term goal is? Matt's long-term goal. You think it's to continue the political climb, or to get a gig on Fox News?
Well, his
He has a gig.
well, he
on
like
Fox.
yeah, right. He just doesn't get paid for it right now. But one of his challenges in running for any kind of a larger office would be working the general election. In the primary, he's going to win, and as long as he's in a strong red area like here, he's fine. But running across the state, with his kind of message, although DeSantis won, and Matt Gaetz is a more eloquent, more articulate, more passionate version of that. But he's always said that his challenge would be running where he's not as well known, and when he's got to really go across the divide and bring Democrats to his side or moderates to his side.
But he's going to become more and more well known across the state with all the appearances on Fox and CNN and so on and so forth. And
Look at the issues he's championing.
Yeah.
He's working on marijuana.
Yeah.
That's not a traditional Republican issue, but
Exactly.
that's something that's very popular with young voters. So.
I think he made a lot of gains with President Trump, and I don't know if he will continue to rise if President Trump isn't there in a couple of years.
He's on the Trump train.
Yeah.
If the Trump train
Early.
goes off the rails, then what does Matt do? But Matt is probably one of the most politically astute people that you can run into, and
he's a smart guy just across the board.
Yeah, he's aggravating as heck, but he is very smart.
He is honestly one of the smartest politicians that I've ever met. In terms of his ability to digest information, capture the essence of it, reformulate it, and see where he should be on it. Yeah, it's like you said, very politically astute, but just issues astute.
And he knows the sound bites.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think he has made a name for himself, though, nationwide. I was surprised in this election when he was running how many letters to the editor and guest views that we had received from people outside of the state on issues about Florida. We didn't run those because it's a local election for the state of Florida. So, but definitely some fear, I think, out there from those who do not agree with him, that they want to get started their game against opposing him.
But he is the most influential politician we've got. This year could not have gone better for him.
Yeah.
It's hard to see a challenge.
Right. For him, for Congress, yeah.
There's no chance from the Democrat side, and obviously in the general, but in the primary side, Chris ran twice, ran well, did the best he could, and still didn't come up with but a third of the vote. So who's going to try that again?
Well, it's hard to be right of Matt Gaetz. It just need any room.
Exactly.
There ain't any room on that side.
Yeah. How does Rick Scott do going to Washington?
So I've had this conversation with a couple of people, and my theory and their theory as well is he loves being the executive. He loves calling the shots and telling people what to do, and he's good at it. I don't know how happy he's going to be as a one of 100 group and having to share that power with everybody else and having to negotiate with them and not being able to call the shots. He seems to want the job.
Start with.
And what?
And at the very bottom.
Oh,
start with.
yeah. You guys have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't disagree with that. That would have been what we're talking about as well.
Interesting. We'll continue this great discussion about what happened in 2018 and what may or may not happen in 2019 in just a couple of moments. You're watching inStudio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're coming right back.
With WSRE and PBS, there's always something amazing coming up next. It's a special commitment to sharing the world and our community. It is an irreplaceable service in communities all across America. The fact is, television that has the power to share the world also has real costs. These costs are largely funded by people like you and me stepping up generously to make sure WSRE continues to thrive. So please stand up now for your cherished values of curiosity, openness, and excellence with your vital donation to WSRE. Give now to make sure that the best in news, culture, science, history, drama, and children's educational programs stay strong right where they belong, right here on WSRE. Thank you.
Welcome back. This is In Studio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We are discussing the defining stories of 2018 and looking ahead at what the big stories of 2019 may be. Our guests are Lisa Nelson-Savage, Executive Editor of the Pensacola News-Journal, Dave Dunwoody, producer and journalist with 88.1 WWF Radio, Rick Outson, owner and publisher of the N Weekly and Rick's blog, and also Andrew McKay from News Radio 1620 and 92.3 FM. Before we leave the state of Florida and talking about Florida politics, what were your thoughts on Florida's agricultural commissioner? A close race, to say the least. Speaking of a Democrat winning.
You know, I think that, and that one's still hard to understand. I mean, on a lot of levels. I mean, Matt Caldwell was a well-known chair of a powerful Florida House committee, visited every county. And on the Democratic slate of all the candidates, that was not the one that I thought would have won. Mm-hmm. Ring was a very good candidate for Attorney General. The others were but and I still don't understand it. I mean, you've got some crazy stuff happening in Broward and Palm Beach counties, but there's somebody though that she was a very, very hard campaigner and well known. Student body president, University of Florida, had kept a lot of those connections. And heavy on, she was heavy on gun control, gun reforms, and heavy on medical marijuana. So maybe those ingredients worked.
I was impressed with the way Matt Campbell wielded that shovel in the campaign ad when he was shoveling the stuff.
There were definitely some interesting campaign ads in 2018, no question about that.
Oh, come on. The Kendrick Dodge mailer. I mean,
Dolphins are for him.
Dolphins are for him. So,
yeah, and we had talked about that on another show that you'd been on with us, Rick, talking about some of the stuff of some of the local politicians really bringing national issues into the campaign, and obviously it didn't work. It failed miserably.
No. Yeah. Well, I was really, really worried, and I think we talked a little bit about last year that going into the election cycle that the bravado, which may be the nicest way to say it, that President Trump brings to politics and the name calling, that we would, in the fake news, that I was worried. I wanted to see how that would play on a local level, who would adopt those tactics. And to a person, everyone that adopted it in a local race lost. Right. And I think that it didn't play.
Well, you think that? I mean, because obviously Matt Gaetz and to some degree Doug Underhill, and they were both very successful.
But Doug Underhill was very, very different right before each of the elections.
Okay.
He was not as aggressive. He was
certainly in the general.
He was a family man, loves the world, hugs, kisses, dogs and puppies. It was a totally different Doug Underhill than it was a year ago that was attacking the Parkland kids. That wasn't the same Doug Underhill that was running.
It's hard to remember that was this year.
Yeah.
That was just this spring.
Those who had actual campaign mailers and commercials that tied themselves to those national politics to a person lost.
Right. Well, I think something you said, we were talking off camera, is in a local election, it still matters to get out and shake hands with people and knock on doors. And a lot of politicians don't want to do that anymore.
A lot of people want to be elected. A lot of people don't want to run. and it makes a big difference. What we were talking about was the appointed superintendent referendum.
Yeah.
What was the difference maker there? I think the biggest difference maker, because a lot of that was done the day of the election, was PYP, Pensacola Young Professionals, manning all the polling places. The other side, there really wasn't an organized effort to keep the elected superintendent.
Right.
I mean, there were a couple of school board members that were working on it and some things behind the scenes, but when you had these bright young people being able to not only ask you to vote for it, but telling you why you should vote. Right. I think it was a huge difference maker. It made PYP relevant.
I mean, there was an enormous push by Quint Studer,
Oh, right.
obviously.
Oh, yeah,
Enormous
exactly. That
push,
funding.
not just with him, but with some of the people who were maybe not originally working for him or with him, but were ultimately, like Walker Wilson and Michelle Salzman.
Right.
And obviously with Andrew Rothfeder, I think was,
No,
DC
Reeves.
Reeves.
DC Reeves,
Yeah.
right.
So,
What they
but
did,
there
though,
wasn't,
is-
go ahead.
Well, they did their homework. They
Right.
anticipated the questions, the arguments that were going to be made, and they were able to provide answers as to why that was an emotional answer versus a factual answer. They debunked a lot of the arguments that have always been used about you can control it by voting for the superintendent. So I think that was the best thing they did. And then when you had these young people and the young professionals going out, these are the parents of
These
the
are their
children
kids.
that are
Right.
going through
Right.
this. If anybody has a vested interest
Right.
in who the
Absolutely.
superintendent will be, it's going to be them.
But in the ground game worked over and over again. I think Doug Underhill had a very good ground game in his race. You looked at Robert Bender. When he, you're in a very crowded race, and he could put a crowd that could wave at a corner. That still means something. It still means that you can do that. So I think that candidates forget that. They forget, well, I can raise $100,000. I can do these nice spots and all these ads and these mailers. But at the end, it's still, knocking on doors still matters.
But
Blocking and
still, every
tackling.
once in a while, the stunt matters too, right?
Right,
Mike
right.
Hill.
Kill.
I mean, Rebecca Bidlack had, better organization, better funding, had been running much longer and, doing her message more effectively for a long time. And Mike Hill, of course, known, but the Trump star. I mean, you were talking about tactics that work.
Right.
That worked. I mean, that was very effective at the last moment. I don't know how many it swayed, but that election was pretty close too, and it worked for him.
And where's the star now?
It's not here yet.
That's right.
Not to go back to the mayor's race for a moment, we had 6 candidates originally, and that was one of the most civil, gentlemanly races that I have seen in a long, long time. You could disagree, but not be disagreeable. Different people, different candidates had different policies, different ideas of doing things, but they didn't get up in each other's face and call names and innuendo and everything. They just laid out their politics, their platform, and let the voters decide.
And in fact, Drew Buchanan, who was the only candidate that really did engage in more attack in the debates, attacking Brian Spencer because he viewed him as his best target to take out so he could get into second place for the runoff, that just didn't work. Even though a lot of us wondered, would a lot of young voters, a lot of tech-savvy voters, UWF students, and that support Drew, and in the end, it just didn't materialize the way you thought it did, or thought it might.
Rick, I know you always do your rising stars. Who do you guys see as the rising political stars here in Northwest Florida in the coming years? And that could be somebody that's not yet perhaps in an elected office.
Well, I think the one that's most appealing to me is Robert Bender. I mean, you look at, he was a very crowded race. He's one of 5, a very powerful one of 5, on a board that has been contentious, to say the least, at least over the last couple of years. I think he's the youngest commissioner, so there's a lot of pressure on him. So far, I thought he handled the passing of the vice chairmanship really well, very diplomatically. The beach is his issue, so he's got to deal with the beach. To me, he's definitely a rising star. He's definitely, of all the ones that are new this year, that's the one I'm watching the most because he's on the hot seat every other week. Yeah,
And he's an interesting story because he was, I go to a lot of events and cover a lot of things. He was at everything I was ever at.
Right.
I saw him everywhere in the lead up to the election. He was out
really
there
did that
meeting
well.
people at the events,
Right.
being seen. Yeah, he did, more than anybody in that regard.
What, you mentioned Rebecca Bidlack. You think she comes back?
I don't know if she's got the appetite to try it again. I hope she does because I think she's really sharp. She obviously has a good set of values and she's a good campaigner. But that was a really bad beat. That was a really bitter loss, I think, to Mike Hill, and feeling like it was at the last moment because of that sort of one event, that took it away from her. So I don't know if she's got it in her to do it again.
Lisa, what do you think?
I think Jared Moore is going to be pretty active. He was also like Bender, was at every event. He was at every one of our Civicon, very quiet in the background, but someone who clearly is willing to educate himself on the issues, and I think he will start out by being quiet because he's listening, but I think we can expect him to play a bigger role.
Dave?
There's so many, it's hard to choose. But I agree with Andrew. Rebecca Bidlack certainly has the chops and the experience now. The question is, does she want to go through this all over again with what happened with Mike Hill? I'm curious to see what happens to Mike Hill. He's got the term, I think it's just my gut feeling that he's seeking higher office at some point. He just needed to get back in to the legislature, get back into political office, and I think he's going to be trying maybe to ride a prominent Republican's coattails into an office, not necessarily Trump, but maybe DeSantis or something like that, or he may try to run for a cabinet position next time. It's just you just look at Mike Hill and you go, what's this guy thinking?
Yeah. So if you ask Rising Star, I'd say Alex Andrade is going to be really interesting to watch because he knows Tallahassee, and to see him operate in an environment that he's familiar with, that's going to be fascinating. He's a very sharp guy. He knows the right people back here as well, and obviously his connection to local with Milton and everything else. So I have high expectations for him.
We mentioned Rebecca. Any other women?
Well, that's one of the disturbing things as I was listening to everyone talk. There just are not a lot of, you were talking about young women up and coming, and there aren't a lot out there. I know the women, the
Institute for Women
in Politics, thank you. They are very active in educating their members and trying to get more people educated and prepared. I think that was the one thing with Rebecca, that she's a very nice woman, probably not as prepared for what she was going to face in that Mike Hill campaign. And that's one of the things they want to do is they've got a lot of training that's going. They're bringing in some national speakers because that is their big, they truly believe that the more they can get to run, the more, and we saw that nationally, more women, particularly diverse women, are getting elected, and they want some of that here.
Well, and Hill. I mean, I thought Butch Hansen would almost certainly win, with his experience at the city council and, being the budget guy for so long, and Navy guy, and then all of a sudden, Ann comes in with some of the work she did with her daughter and with the issues on the, demolition of structures and some of the local stuff, and all of a sudden, and Bruce Beach. And all of a sudden, she gets elected, and she's doing great. Again, early indicators are that she's really, filling that role, and I like what I see from her on council.
Yeah, the other one that I think to keep an eye on is Walker Wilson.
Yeah,
ran for school board, lost in a very tough district to run in.
An unwinnable race.
He's
in that
going to be the incoming president of PYP. Definitely, he's one of the staff members for the transition team. Very, sharp guy, caring guy, well liked. Yeah. He's somebody that if he can find the right race to run, I think he'll do well.
Interesting. We're going to continue our discussion in just a couple of moments. Hope you'll stick around. This is In Studio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. You're watching In Studio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're discussing the big events of 2018 and what may be in store for 2019. Being joined by Dave Dunwoody, producer and journalist with 88.1 WWF Radio, Rick Alson, the owner and publisher of the In Weekly and Rick's blog, Lisa Nelson Savage, executive editor of the Pensacola News Journal, and Andrew McKay from News Radio 1620 and 92.3 FM. Lisa, tell me about the big stories as far as the P&J is concerned. And I know you guys are able to have your analytics that kind of tells what people are reading and paying attention to online. So what were they?
So if we're looking at purely from a traffic standpoint, our number one story, and I'm pleased about this, was actually a hard news story. It was the Florida amendments and what were actually in the amendments and what were not, breaking those down. That by far was our number one story. And I know talking to my peers across Gannett in Florida, their number one story as well. So that's a good sign.
Right, that is a good sign.
On the flip of that, a lot of viral stories that went pretty crazy nationally. They weren't local readers reading them, but the so-called neck man, that was all the memes of late. I mean, that story was just a arrest for something silly.
Just the mugshot.
Just the
mugshot alone.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's always our challenge to balance that. I mean, they're not local readers who are reading them. There's obviously an interest in them, and we are here to provide information people want, but we're going to make that a very small part of what we do because we don't have to do anything. They're going to succeed on their own.
Rick, what's the biggest response to the stories you ran this year?
You know, I think the Bruce Beach and the Bayview Community Center debates. I mean, just really sort of the dysfunction in City Hall. It really got bad through a period there, which ended up in the end with the city administrator, Eric Olson, resigning. That period was a very strong period. I think the other thing was, for us, a big story was the conviction of Marcus May, who's the founder of the New Point Education Partners, which was, it kind of got lost in all the election stuff, but that was a huge story in that he stole $5 million from taxpayers, school children across the state, and had a really sophisticated racketeering scheme. And that was a story that we broke in 2015, and we were able to see the culmination of it this year. So that, for us, was a real big story.
What about that guy, Rick Alson, writing a book? Did that get any traction?
Not much. Not much.
As he's making film deals, as he's doing.
Anyway, well, while I'm on it, go ahead, give yourself a little promotion there. You wrote a book.
We did. City of Grudges, a fictional story based in Pensacola. We've been very fortunate with it. That won a couple of awards this year. We did pretty well. The sequel is Blood in the Water, is with the agent, and they are trying to sell the movie rights now, which is holding up the publication of it. But the second one is built around a gel explosion, which we know would never ever happen.
So it's pure fiction. Right,
what would happen if Walker Holmes
was it in a rainstorm by chance?
You have to read it.
Dave,
can I play you in the movie?
Yes, it's
stunt double.
You have to have a dog.
Biggest story over at WWF.
Well, there are several big ones, but I'd say one closer at or near the top would be Amendment 4, its passage, giving convicted felons who have done their time, paid their debt, their voting rights back and their other rights as well. Right now, though, they're trying to figure out how to implement it, which I guess will be the top thing on the agenda when the legislature comes back to Tallahassee in March, or in May, I'm sorry.
Andrew?
So there's a story that got a lot of traction, and it's a really interesting one because we tried to get rid of we wanted to go to year-round daylight time.
Well,
And this was every time we talked about this, every time we posted about this online and clarified it for people. It was a very confusing story for how this would work. Lots of attention, and it was a big deal that it passed, and everybody was all excited, and then it just nothing. It got picked up in the Senate by Rubio, and nobody on the House side was willing to touch it, and it sits there waiting for a babysitter, and it's probably never going to happen. But the story, I think, of the year, and we haven't really talked about it yet. I think we'd all agree the biggest story for our area was obviously the hurricane, Michael.
Right.
And though it didn't hit us, it obviously hit really close, and we were all covering that extensively for a long period of time, and still are. I mean, we're still dealing with the long-term cost of that in the state, how that's going to affect the budget going forward. I mean, people there who can't get there, they can't even get, they've got a trailer in their yard, they can't get into it, or they don't have a trailer at all, and they're qualified for it. So what I wonder is, do you guys think that that close enough call will get the attention of all the people that have been sort of letting things slide because it's been a long time and we're not going to get hit, we got all these false alarms, or not? I mean, I think yes, but I feel like I'm being optimistic when I say that.
If you've lived here through Ivan and Dennis, yes, it'll jog your memory. The big concern with a lot of emergency management is the people who have moved here since we had that last spate of hurricanes in 04, 05. They've come here, they've not had to worry about it, they have not even seen one, and the big concern and the big challenge is to get them ready, get them up to speed, just in case one decides to blow in here someday.
You had talked, Andrew, about will that scare people. I was surprised how quickly readers lost interest. We're looking at it purely from a numbers standpoint, and their incredible amount of traffic, web traffic, when we were looking at the preparations for it, and where was it going to land. And the first couple days, but you could see it day by day tick down, even though we were still telling those stories, the destruction, the homeless people, people who lost their lives, and their interest died so quickly. It was shocking. And I know editors from across the network who warned me about that. And they're just be prepared, because our heart was so invested in telling these stories. And they don't take it personally. The interest goes away pretty quickly.
Well, we certainly hope folks do not forget about them, because I have heard some very frightening stories coming out of there, and still just the challenges that the citizens of that part of our community are dealing with.
We live, in our area, it's really interesting attention, not just attention spans, but which things people find to care about. We're in the same state as Miami, but Miami's, it's a long way away. But over the border into Alabama, unless it's right on the border and it's a big crime story, even Mobile might as well be 5 hours away. It's Pensacola, it's Gulf Breeze, it's Milton, Okaloosa, and people just don't much care about things that happen outside of that unless they think it's going to affect them. It's a very interesting place in that scope of concern.
And I want to ask you guys coming up in just a couple of minutes what you're most kind of focused on for 2019. But before I do so, on a national level, let's talk. I think we have to do this for a second. Let's talk about the death of President George H.W. Bush passing away. You watched that funeral, and it made me proud to be an American when I just looked at all that he had accomplished in his life. Political ideology, regardless of what you believe, you just had to look at him and say, that's a classy man. And
such a connection to our community, too. With the aviation, agreed. It was hard to, there's a little bit of fear as we went into this, thinking with everything that's happened with politics in the last few years, people are just so cruel to each other. And I think the country really came together for that, and it was very moving. And I think even now we're still seeing stories being told and people wanting to share. It was the good old days, if you think about how he carried himself.
It's almost like they didn't realize how much they wanted to like him until we were at that distance from it, and given what we're seeing now a lot of times.
And this was a president who wasn't reelected.
Right.
Exactly.
And now
he wasn't so popular then, or at least after the popularity from the war died down, but people want that. They want to be able to feel good about their leaders.
Well, and politics doesn't have to be mean. And we're in such a divisive era that we're at each other's throats that he brought us back to the thoughts that we don't have to be mean.
Right.
And military service means something.
It does.
The sacrifices that means something. It's not light. It has a lot of weight to it.
And another American hero passed this year, Senator McCain, John McCain.
One of the greatest guys ever. Great interview, great person. Yes, and just a fun guy to talk to. It just really was.
I just a couple of things. First, about President Bush. I'm sure you've all seen the footage during World War II of him getting fished out of the Pacific by the submarine.
Right.
At like 19 years old. I couldn't help but wonder if he had been lost in that battle, who would have been president, after Reagan? Would have been Reagan's vice president or been somebody else? This is how I guess American history is written. How things fall into place. But Senator McCain, he pretty much became the non-Republican Republican. In other words, he didn't always vote strictly down party ideology or party lines.
You say he didn't always.
He didn't always.
I would say it's a little less than that.
Yeah.
I'm running real close on time here, so in about 30 seconds, I just want to go around the table and have each one of you kind of say, what are you going to be focusing on for 2019? What's your prognostication of the big story for 2019? And I'll begin with you, Andrew.
Well, I mean, clearly it's going to be, I think, there's a lot of local things simmering, but we're all wondering what's going to happen with the president, with a split Congress, shoot, you have an Obamacare decision that just came down by the time this airs a couple weeks, but, striking it down, and that's going to go to the Supreme Court. So I'm curious to see what happens in D.C., especially when you have a divided government.
Dave?
My curiosity is a little closer to home. With the ST Aerospace now up and running, they're already talking expansion. It'll be interesting to see just where that goes and how much restore money or oil spill money that they can collect from that. And also, I'm planning, I like to do, multi-part series on different things. I did one on 1968 this past year. And I'd like to look into doing one, maybe taking different slants when it comes to the moon landing, Apollo 11, and maybe Woodstock. Maybe combine them.
Interesting. Lisa?
I think a new mayor. What is our city going to look at? I think there's a lot of things we don't know. Mayor Hayward was very tight-lipped, and Grover is still in the discovery phase. And I think a lot of things, how much money do we even have left to spend? Right. What type of development will really end up that was promised coming to fruition?
Right. Rick, in about 30.
We're looking at school violence. We had an incident happen at Woodham. Workman Middle School that videotaped looked pretty vicious. We got the Department of Juvenile Justice stats out. Workman Middle School is the second had more arrests on campus than every other middle school in the state but one. Booker T. Washington, the high school right next to Workman, is tied for 5th for the most arrests in the state for last school year. There's something going on in our schools. We're not being told about it. We're going to cover it.
Thank you all so very much. I certainly hope you have a wonderful 2019. Wish you all the best and very much great success. And hopefully we'll see you back here
next year.
And we'll talk about 2019 and 2020. We've been looking back at some of the big stories of 2018 and looking ahead on what may have in store for 2019. Who knows? Our guests have been Dave Dunwoody, producer and journalist with 88.1 WWF Radio, Andrew McKay from News Radio 1620 and 92.3 FM, Rick Outzen, the owner and publisher of the In-Weekly newspaper and Rick's blog, and also a published novelist, and also Lisa Nelson Savage, the executive editor of the Pensacola News Journal. By the way, this program will be available soon online at WSRE.org as well as on YouTube, so please feel free to share. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for watching, and thank you for your support of WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We look forward to seeing a lot of you in 2019. I certainly hope you enjoyed this broadcast, and I wish you all the very best in the new year. Take wonderful care of yourself, and we'll see you in 2019.